My name is Evelyn Hale, and for most of my life I felt like a visitor inside my own family. Not the kind of visitor welcomed with warmth, but the kind people tolerated because her name still happened to appear somewhere on the invitation list. I was 36 years old when everything finally changed. But the truth is, I had been fading long before that night at the Grand Harbor Hotel. I started disappearing at 15, the morning my mother died. The day my father stopped speaking her name aloud. In the moment Celeste Monroe entered our home wearing soft perfume, elegant dresses, and a smile sharp enough to erase every memory my mother had left behind. My mother's name was Vivian Claire Hale. To the outside world, she was barely mentioned in my father's success story. To me, she was everything. She was an architect, a preservation expert, and the first person who ever taught me that old things are not worthless simply because careless people stop seeing their value. When I was little, she used to take me through abandoned buildings before sunrise, empty theaters, forgotten libraries, crumbling hotels with dust floating through broken windows like gold in the morning light. She would hold my hand and point toward cracked pillars and stained ceilings. "Never trust the paint, Evelyn," she used to tell me. "Paint can hide anything, look at the foundation." Foundations always tell the truth. At the time, I thought she was teaching me about buildings. I didn't realize she was teaching me how to survive people. My father, Richard Hale, was famous across Savannah for restoring historic hotels. People admired him endlessly. He appeared in magazines, attended charity galas, and gave interviews about preserving history. But the truth was simple. My mother built the vision, my father only sold it. The Grand Harbor Hotel, the company's greatest achievement, had been my mother's dream project. She discovered the property when it was nearly condemned and spent years fighting city officials to save it. Then one morning she was gone. A stroke. Sudden, cruel, final. One day she was arguing with contractors over original crown molding. The next day our house was filled with flowers, whispering relatives, and casseroles that smelled too sweet. For a while, grief kept my father and me close. Then 6 months later, he married Celeste. Celeste never arrived like a villain, that would have been easier. She arrived like a solution. She spoke gently, she smiled carefully. She told everyone she only wanted to help Richard heal. People adored her, but I learned quickly that some forms of cruelty never need raised voices. First, my mother's framed blueprints disappeared from the hallway. Celeste said they made the house feel trapped in the past. Then my mother's drafting desk was moved from the sunroom into the garage because Celeste wanted a meditation space. Her books vanished. Her photographs slowly disappeared. At first, the changes seemed small. Then I realized small acts repeated every day eventually become a burial. Celeste had a son named Damien from her previous marriage. He was older than me, handsome, confident, and perfectly comfortable, occupying space that had never belonged to him. Within a year, he was calling my father Dad. Within 2 years, everyone else was too. At family gatherings, Celeste introduced him proudly. "This is Damien, Richard's son." Then she would glance toward me. "And this is Evelyn, Vivian's daughter." Not Richard's daughter, Vivian's daughter, a leftover from another life. As the years passed, Damien became the golden child of the Hale family empire. My father handed him executive positions, investor meetings, and magazine interviews he barely understood. Damien learned enough corporate language to sound impressive in expensive suits, but he never built anything real. I chose another path. I studied structural engineering and historic preservation. I restored libraries, churches, and old theaters most people considered beyond saving. I loved the work because it kept me close to my mother. Every restored building felt like finishing a sentence she had started years earlier. But in my family, honest work meant nothing unless it looked luxurious. Celeste called my career playing with bricks. Damien once joked at Thanksgiving, "Evelyn fixes old walls while the rest of us build the future." Everyone laughed. My father looked down at his plate. That was what he always did when I needed him most. He looked away. The Grand Harbor Hotel hurt the worst. Every article called it Richard Hale's masterpiece. Every gala praised his vision. Every speech erased my mother, and for years I stayed silent. I told myself silence was dignity. I told myself patience was strength. I kept hoping my father would eventually stand in front of a crowded room and finally say her name. But he never did. Instead, Celeste became bolder. Damien became richer, and I became easier to ignore. By the time my father's 70th birthday gala was announced, I already understood my role. I was expected to stand quietly at the edge of the ballroom while they celebrated a legacy built on my mother's erased name. What none of them realized was this: foundations can stay hidden for years, but eventually they tell the truth. 2 months before the gala, I received a letter from a law office I had never heard of. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and formal enough to feel important before I even opened it. My full name was typed across the front. Evelyn Claire Hale. No one used my middle name anymore. Seeing it there felt like hearing my mother's voice from another room. Inside was a single page. Miss Hale, per the instructions left by your mother, Vivian Claire Hale, please contact our office regarding the ownership structure of the Grand Harbor Hotel. I read the sentence 3 times. Ownership structure. Grand Harbor Hotel, my mother. The words did not belong together, and yet there they were. The next morning, I sat across from attorney Miriam Whittaker in a quiet office above an antique bookstore. The room smelled like polished wood and old paper. Miriam herself looked calm, sharp, and impossible to fool. She opened a navy folder and slid the first document toward me. At the top was a company name I had never seen before, Claire Preservation Holdings. What is this? I asked. Your mother's company, Miriam replied. Then she explained everything. For nearly 2 decades, the Grand Harbor Hotel had publicly operated under Hale Heritage Hospitality. But the company never truly owned the property. The land beneath the hotel, the restoration rights, the architectural plans, and the preservation covenant had all been transferred into Claire Preservation Holdings before my mother died. My mother had built a legal wall around the hotel, a structure no one could quietly erase. Miriam placed another document in front of me. Upon your 36th birthday, she said, ownership transferred fully to you. I stared at her. To me? To you? The air disappeared from my lungs. For years, my father Celeste and Damien had hosted galas, interviews, and investor events inside a building they never actually owned. They had erased my mother while standing on property she legally protected. Did my father know? I asked. Miriam turned another page. Richard Hale's signature appeared clearly across the bottom. He knew, she said quietly. Something inside me cracked, not because he forgot, because he remembered and stayed silent anyway. Then Miriam gave me worse news. Celeste had recently contacted attorneys about transferring company-controlled assets to Damien before the birthday gala. She believes the hotel belongs entirely to Hale Heritage Hospitality, Miriam explained. She's wrong. For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt solid. Like my mother had reached across 18 years and handed me the truth herself. For several days, I told nobody. I went to work. I reviewed restoration reports. I answered emails. But every night, I reopened the documents and read them again. My mother had not left me jewelry or sentimental letters. She had left me the ground beneath their empire. 3 weeks before the gala, I visited my father. I brought a small wooden box containing the original brass key from the Grand Harbor Hotel's front desk. My mother's initials were engraved into the metal. VCH, Vivian Claire Hale. When my father opened the box, his hands trembled. I remember this, he whispered. For one brief second, I saw the man my mother once loved. Then Celeste appeared in the doorway. How nostalgic, she said smoothly. But Richard already has enough reminders of the past. My father closed the box. He said nothing. And in that moment, I finally understood something devastating. My mother had protected the hotel from Celeste. But nobody had protected me from hoping my father would someday become brave. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my mirror wearing a simple black dress and my mother's pearl earrings. The Grand Harbor Hotel glowed against the waterfront like a monument built from memory and money. Valets hurried between luxury cars while chandeliers spilled golden light through tall windows. Inside, the ballroom looked flawless. Crystal towers, white roses, a massive screen showing photographs of the hotel restoration. My mother's work filled every wall. Her name appeared nowhere. Instead, beneath a portrait of my father, enormous letters read, Richard Hale, a lifetime of vision. At the check-in desk, a young employee searched for my name twice before whispering awkwardly, I don't see you listed. An older coordinator leaned over. That's Evelyn Hale, she murmured. Put her under family overflow. Family overflow? The phrase hurt more than I expected. Dinner began. Damien gave the first speech praising my father's leadership and discussing the future of the company. Then Celeste took the microphone. She thanked investors, board members, friends, staff. She praised Richard for turning broken buildings into beauty. Still, she never said my mother's name. Something inside me went cold, not emotional, clear. I stood and walked toward the stage. The ballroom slowly quieted. My father saw me. For a second I thought he might finally step forward. Then Celeste leaned toward the microphone. "Security," she said calmly. The room froze. "Please escort her out before she embarrasses this family further." 2 security guards approached. Damien smirked. Celeste stood smiling and my father remained silent. Again, the guard beside me spoke gently. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." I looked directly at my father. "I came tonight to give you one final chance to remember who built this family," I said quietly. "Now I know you never forgot. You simply chose silence." I placed the wooden box containing my mother's hotel key onto a nearby table, then I walked out. Outside, the night air felt sharp against my skin. Inside my car, I sat in darkness for nearly a minute, then I opened my laptop and called Miriam. "Are you ready?" she asked. I looked toward the glowing hotel windows. "Yes," I replied. Within minutes, ownership notices were delivered. Clare Preservation Holdings formally informed Hale Heritage Hospitality that the operating lease would not continue under current terms. Damien's expansion lenders were notified that the property used as collateral did not belong to the company. The City Preservation Board received legal documentation proving Vivian Clare Hale's authorship of the hotel restoration. Finally, a cease and desist order demanded that the company stop using my mother's designs without proper credit. By the time dessert was served inside the ballroom, the foundation beneath their celebration had already started collapsing. When I finally turned my phone back on later that night, there were more than 60 missed calls. Celeste, Damien, my father, then the doorbell rang. All 3 of them stood outside my apartment. For years I had gone to them. Now they were standing at my door instead. Celeste stormed inside first. "What have you done?" she demanded. I raised a hand calmly. "Lower your voice or leave." She stopped instantly. My apartment was modest compared to my father's mansion, but everything inside belonged to me. Restoration sketches lined the walls, engineering books covered the shelves, and on the coffee table sat the legal folder Miriam had prepared. "You stole from this family," Celeste snapped. "No," I replied. "I inherited from my mother." I placed the deed documents on the table. "The Grand Harbor property belongs to Clare Preservation Holdings," I explained. "The company only operated the hotel." Damien grabbed the papers, his face slowly drained of color. "My financing deal," he whispered, "was built on collateral you never controlled," I finished. Celeste turned toward my father. "Richard, tell her this is ridiculous." But my father only stared at his signature from 18 years earlier. "You knew," I said, his shoulders slumped. "Yes," Celeste looked horrified. "You knew." This time his silence didn't protect her. It exposed him. I laid down another document. "As legal owner, I now control the lease, restoration rights, branding approvals, and architectural materials connected to the hotel." Damien dropped the papers. "You ruined everything?" "No," I replied steadily. "I removed the lie holding it together." Celeste stepped closer, anger finally stripping away her polished image. "Your mother is dead, Evelyn." The room became silent. For years, those words would have shattered me. This time they didn't. "Yes," I answered calmly. "And somehow she still protected me better than my living father ever did." My father flinched. I didn't apologize. The truth only sounds cruel to people who spent years avoiding it. Then Celeste said the one thing she could never take back. "You were never supposed to matter this much." And there it was, the truth beneath 18 years of manipulation. She had built her life believing I could be erased without consequence, but foundations always surface eventually. Over the following weeks, everything Celeste had carefully polished began falling apart. The gala footage disappeared from the company website. Promotional videos praising Richard Hale's vision were removed after legal notices demanded proper credit for Vivian Clare Hale. The City Preservation Board opened investigations into years of misleading public material. Damien's expansion project collapsed when lenders realized the hotel property was unavailable as collateral. Investors started asking difficult questions, questions powerful people only ask when they suspect the story they believed was built on stolen ground. Within 10 days, my father resigned from the board of Hale Heritage Hospitality. The press release described it as retirement. It wasn't, it was surrender. Celeste moved out of the waterfront estate shortly afterward. Damien sent me one final message. "You destroyed this family," I replied with a single sentence. "No." I exposed it, then I blocked his number. 3 months later, I returned to the Grand Harbor Hotel at sunrise. The ballroom lights were off, no champagne, no orchestra. Only soft morning sunlight pouring through the same arched windows my mother fought to save. A small gathering waited near the lobby. Preservation officials, architects, Miriam Whittaker, and my father. He looked older than I remembered. A bronze plaque stood hidden beneath a white cloth. When the cloth was removed, I read the inscription slowly. The Grand Harbor Hotel restored through the vision and work of Vivian Clare Hale, architect, preservationist, founder. Everything enduring begins with structure. For the first time in 18 years, my mother's name belonged to the building again. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them away. After the ceremony ended, everyone slowly left the lobby. Only my father and I remained. He walked toward the plaque and touched my mother's name with trembling fingers. "I should have said it years ago," he whispered. "Yes," I answered, "you should have." He looked at me with eyes full of exhaustion and regret. "Can I still try to fix this?" I studied him carefully. I saw the weakness that had allowed silence to grow for nearly 2 decades, but for the first time I also saw honesty. "You can start," I said quietly, "by never looking away from her name again." He nodded. I didn't forgive him that morning. Forgiveness is not automatically earned just because guilt finally arrives. But I let him stand beside me inside the hotel my mother saved, and for that moment it was enough. I still own the Grand Harbor Hotel, not because I wanted revenge, because my mother built something meant to survive. She taught me that paint can lie, people can lie, but foundations always tell the truth. And when the truth finally rises through the floorboards, every structure built on silence eventually collapses. Thank you for reading until the very end. If Evelyn's story moved you, reminded you of your own family experiences, or inspired you to stand up for yourself, share your thoughts and support the story. And remember, never judge a structure by its surface, look at the foundation.